Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. I'm here with Loren Bast from Bainbridge Prepares, and tomorrow is the Great ShakeOut, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but also more broadly about preparedness. And it's one of those topics um, that we hate to talk about, I guess, or don't want to think about because we think maybe if we ignore it, it won't happen. But I like to think that preparedness for disasters reduces the chance of disaster. Well, in a way, I guess it sort of does because it lessens the surprise factor to some degree. Before we start, though, I want to thank our sponsor, which is Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. They offer independent living and assisted living and memory care up on Rolling Bay. You can take a tour, enjoy a free lunch on them by calling 206-594-1010. Ask for Celia or Jamie, ask about day stay and respite programs, and check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. So, Loren, thank you for agreeing to share the screen with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Reed.
So, tomorrow is a big event across the country, right?
Not just across the country, but actually internationally. And I'll speak to that in a moment. And so, Reed, I prepared a few slides. I think when it comes to topics like this, slides are better than me just yapping. So now you can have yapping plus some visuals to
Slides.
go along with
Neat.
the yapping.
Okay, well, why don't you try
So,
using that little share button and we'll
all
see if it
right,
works. Um,
okay,
there you go. Very nice.
perfect. Well, again, Reed, thank you for having me. And I'm not going to be kind of looking to see how many folks have joined. So I will just I'll present as if I'm presenting to either one person or 1,000. So
Great.
here
Well,
we go.
what we do with this is we put it up on our YouTube channel and share it over Facebook, and people will get a view at it. So let's get a heads up here on what's going on.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a loose agenda of what I'll be covering. So first is who the heck am I? And then we'll get into the what Reed had teed up, which is what is the Great Shakeout? What is it all about? Of course, Great Shakeout, and Reed has already kind of implied that the topic is earthquakes. So, how is the Puget Sound and the island at risk from earthquakes? And how are we preparing, or how can you prepare? Related to that is what is Bainbridge Prepares, the organization I'm representing, and how is it involved in preparing for the region? And then if there's any questions at the end, I'm happy to take them. Okay, so who am I? My name is Loren Bast. I'm the executive director of Bainbridge Prepares. I have been since 2018, which is mind-boggling because I thought someone would wise up and kick me out of that role in over the years, but no one has yet. But so I've been executive director since 2018 and gone through quite a bit since then in terms of emergencies and disasters, big and small. My background actually was not in emergency preparedness. I was spent most of my career in technology and media, but had some experience with disasters. The first was Hurricane Hugo, a major hurricane that hit my home at the time, which is the U.S. Virgin Islands, all the way back in 1989. So I was a teenager back then. And then much more recently, I got involved in the disaster response after Hurricanes Maria and Irma that severely affected the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and essentially the eastern half of the Caribbean. And so I saw what uh, various facets of the response and things that worked well, but more things that actually didn't work very well. And that got me my first taste of emergency response, and also got me involved in Bainbridge Prepares, and met the founder, Scott James. and he asked me to take over again in 2018 as the executive director, although he is extremely involved as our board chair, and basically my colleague in crime. So, okay. So the reason I'm speaking today at 10 on October 16th is because of the event going on tomorrow at 10:17 a.m. So, the Great ShakeOut. Now, I'll because we have limited time, I'll just kind of make a plug for shakeout.org if for anybody that's interested in learning more about it than just this slide. But not only is it a Washington State-based um, uh, initiative, it isn't just a West Coast or a national, U.S. initiative, but essentially it is worldwide, especially in earthquake-prone countries. So, for anybody watching this, if you have a sister that lives in Japan or a nephew that lives in New Zealand, all of those countries are participating too, and they have various kind of country-specific ways in which they are preparing or they're getting the word out. But essentially, the best way to participate is to visit the website and tomorrow morning at 10:17 a.m. drop what you're doing, literally and figuratively, and essentially pretend that a large earthquake is hitting where you're at. So what you need to do then is find a place to provide sign a kind of local cover. Could be a kitchen table, it could be an office desk, or basically under a high bed, and hold on because there's again with the shaking of an earthquake, things are going to move around. That table's going to move around. You're going to move around, and so you're going to try to hold on to something that will make sure that you don't get tousled or minimize the tossling of your cover and of you. So again, 10:17 a.m. Make a little note on your calendar to do that tomorrow. So, how is the Puget Sound in general at risk? So here's a visual that covers a couple of the kind of earthquakes that we are prone to, and how recently some of them have happened. So you have essentially a cutout of Washington and Canada, and then the Pacific Ocean west of us. And we'll start from west to east. So you have essentially a few faults that are off the Pacific Ocean in the Juan de Fuca Plate. And so those faults are always moving, and most of the time, they move just a tiny bit, and sometimes they move a lot. And when those plates move, a lot, they create larger earthquakes. The largest one that on historical record was in 1700, so now 325 years ago, uh, that registered upwards of a 9.0 on what's known as the Richter scale. There's some new methods of calculating magnitude, and uh, I'm having a brain lapse at the moment. But basically, a whole
Basically,
bunch of
that's
shaking.
big.
What's that?
That's big.
Yes, it's big
Nine is big in any list that you have
in
there.
any scale. Yes, and so it created a whole bunch of geological changes to the region. At the time, Seattle and the Puget Sound was not populated the way that it is today, obviously, but it was registered via some local tribes and Native American populations. And there's historical records from Japan and Asian countries of large tsunamis that occurred on the date that geologic records suggest that it happened. So 9.0 back then, We'll get into the risk future 9.0s in the next slide, but let's keep going down the other type of earthquakes that might happen. So you have crustal earthquakes, and which can form some deep earthquakes. So the last deep earthquake that many have experienced in the region was back in 2001, the Nisqually quake. Uh, It caused quite a bit of damage to essentially unreinforced structures, unreinforced masonry structures. So if you look at pictures back from 2001, there's a whole bunch of Pioneer Square brick buildings that had crumbled, a whole bunch of masonry chimneys in West Seattle that had crumbled, and it really caused a fair bit of damage back in 2001. So the deep earthquakes are more probable, but create generally less damage than the subduction zone earthquakes. And let's talk about the actual percentages. So per the U.S. Geologic Survey, what are the chances of a major earthquake uh, on the Seattle Fault, which is a fault that basically runs through Seattle and right through Bainbridge Island? There's about a 15% chance of a crustal type quake that registers over 6.5 on the Richter scale in the next 50 years. In terms of one that is incredibly destructive, a 9.0 magnitude or higher, that's in the range of 10 to 14%. Now, the mild to moderate impact quakes, such as the Nisqually, there's about an 84% chance of happening, something in the 6.0 or thereabouts to 7, uh, 84% chance in the next 50 years. So, um, high severity is relatively low, but a medium severity is relatively high in the next 50 years. All
Right. And
right.
of course, 15% is not nothing. So
15% is definitely not nothing when you consider
the
just
major,
how devastating a 9.0 earthquake would be. And I at the there's a lot more information that I could have provided on damages and that sort of thing, but for the sake of brevity, a lot of this could be researched off of this presentation. What are the risks for Bainbridge Island specifically? Reed, you probably know this better than anybody else, but I will pretend that you don't. So, how many people are residents, roughly, of Bainbridge Island?
26,000,
Yeah, somewhere between 23 and
25,
20. Yeah, basically 23,000, and maybe I'm using slightly old uh, population records, but around 23
but
to
maybe not.
26,000 is about right. So, to serve that 23,000 to 26,000 resident population, and again, that's just residents, on 4th of July weekend, on Rotary Auction week, that can swell by a few thousand. So to serve that size of a population at any one time, so on a Tuesday morning, let's say at 3 a.m., how many police officers are
Or
available, are staffed, are staffed for Bainbridge Island on a Tuesday morning in general?
in early morning, you're talking about before the middle of the day. So
Before the
these
middle
are
of the day,
just,
so like 2 a.m. Most of us are sleeping,
so
but
I'm going to say it's 2 to 3 people.
oh, you got it. You got it.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to give
So
myself a prize.
so 99.99% of the time, those 2 or 3 officers are, adequate. There's not much happening on sleepy Bainbridge Island. But in times of major disasters, that would be insufficient. Um, Now, that's 2 to 3 officers that are on duty. But Reed, when one of those officers or both of them need to, let's say that I'm coming back from a hard night in Winslow, and I start knocking over trash cans and various other things, and I have an interaction with the police department and they need to take me to the county jail. Where would they be taking me?
Well,
Where is our
they're
jail?
going to have to go across the bridge. They're going to have to go down to Port Orchard, I think.
You are right. You are getting an A plus so far in all of your
But
answers,
that
Reed.
means that they're not on the island anymore.
That means that they are not on the island. And so there may be one, maybe two officers that are actually on the island. Um, in a normal scenario, if there was something that came up on the island that was very localized, let's say that there was a just any incident that is just very local to Bainbridge Island, where would our what other agencies may be able to help them?
Well, we've got the fire department.
We do, but in terms of maybe police safety, um, in law enforcement,
You mean if they were calling for backup?
if they were calling for backup, yep,
Well, they're going to have to call from somebody who isn't on the island.
that is correct. So you have Suquamish Police Department, you have Polesville Police Department, and Washington State Patrol, but all those are off island, as you indicated. So
So
you touched on Bainbridge.
they either need kayaks or the bridge.
Well, let's get to that. Hold on. You're giving away the a few of the answers already. But you talked about Bainbridge Island Fire. Your average battalion or on duty numbers of firefighters and paramedics. How many at one time? Again, on that Tuesday morning scenario,
No. We've got three fire stations.
we do. Are
I
all of
don't.
them staffed at one time?
Well, I'm guessing that they aren't, but I don't know.
Um,
So let's say that there are paramedics and at the station, maybe five folks.
You're pretty close. So about six to nine firefighters and paramedics on duty at your Tuesday 2 a.m. scenario. Now, for anybody that has witnessed any incident on Bainbridge Island that involves a fire response that goes beyond maybe just a single household issue, that entire regiment can be consumed with fighting an apartment fire in Winslow. Or just this week, we had a freon leak at the Virginia Mason Clinic that required evacuating the entire building. Multiple agencies from off the island responded, and so that there goes your six to nine firefighters and paramedics responding to one one larger building than or a brush fire or something like that that's occurring on the island with a whole bunch of backup coming from other places. So their relief, we talked about this reinforcements. So we'll touch on one particular item in reinforcements. So how many of our first responders actually don't live on Bainbridge Island? How many of them live somewhere else?
Well, I'm going to think it's more like 70%.
Boy, Ree, did you look at these answers?
No, I just have been paying attention.
You are wonderful. It almost might be that you are one of Bainbridge Prepares' top volunteers, but maybe that's not it. Maybe that's not why you know all the answers to these questions. But yes, you are right. 70% live off the island, and so um, even not considering help from Paulsville Fire or Suquamish Fire or Kingston, just to kind of relieve that crew of either Bainbridge Island police officers or fire department individuals. Those reinforcements are most of them are gonna need to come off from off island. And so you also gave the answer away to this earlier, but we'll pretend you didn't. So what are the big bottlenecks to getting them onto the island? What's the big risk?
Well, there's a little teeny bridge that's pretty old that runs between here and Hallsbow,
Yeah,
Suquamish.
Squamish. Yeah, and
And then there's this I mean the only other way that people regularly get here is by boat. And the ferries don't run all the time, and sometimes they don't run at all. And if we had an earthquake, maybe the docks might not work the way we expect them to.
correct. Yes. Now, I'm listing on these slides specifically the Agapas Bridge, which you mentioned is pretty old. Do you remember exactly when it was built? How old it is?
No, except I think it was 1956 or 7.
You're very close. It's 74 years old. And so um, now on the Washington State Department of Transportation, they consider the bridge functionally obsolete. That doesn't mean that it's unsafe, but it means that if they were to build that bridge again, they would not build it the way that it is currently built, simply because built a bridge built for the way Bainbridge Island was 74 years ago is not adequate to serve the needs of Bainbridge Island and Suquamish and the surrounding region today. So essentially, yes, that bridge is a big risk. And you mentioned the ferry system, which, as we know, especially now, has been experiencing severe disruptions. Most of their crews come from off the island, and so in order to get one of our larger ferries or any ferry operating, requires a lot of that crew to come from off island and get to the boats. So that is a pretty big bottleneck. And so when you round this all up, what does this mean for the average resident of Bainbridge Island? It means that you're going to be depending on essentially your support network and your neighbors in order to respond, within the next couple of hours and help you out or help them out. And so a program that Bainbridge Prepares runs is the Map Your Neighborhood program. And that really allows it, it's an excuse to kind of throw a party for your neighborhood and get to know your neighbors and really talk through what you might do in a larger emergency or a small emergency. It's always good to know your neighbors. It could be you might need to call on them for an earthquake. You might need somebody's help during a winter storm if a power is out and you need to, you don't have four-wheel drive on your car and you really need to get a prescription from your pharmacy, or just just the use cases are endless for having a really good relationship with your neighbors in the event of emergency. So one of the best things you can do is figure out if you're already in a map your neighborhood. Over 50% of Bainbridge Island has been mapped, is what we use the verb for, mapped at least once in the last 10 years. And if it's been a while or you're one of those neighborhoods that has not thrown a map your neighborhood party yet, you can research more about that on bainbridgeprepares.org and find out how you can throw your own map your neighborhood party and get involved.
How can I
Uh,
find out if my neighborhood has been mapped, if there is somebody to contact?
Yep. So you can go and ask a few different individuals. Well, first, um, if let's say you're new to a neighborhood, and your neighbors aren't sure if you've ever, kind of held the map your neighborhood party, it's probably time for a new one. And so if the last time was 6 years ago or was 7 years ago, you know what? Let's throw a new party. But to be sure, you can contact two individuals, and this information is on our website. Ann Cook is our wonderful Map Your Neighborhood volunteer lead. And so she has a record of all the neighborhoods that have been mapped, as well as the Map Your Neighborhood captains. And she works with our city emergency manager, Ann Lesage, and Ann also has all that information as well as additional information about neighborhoods and whether there's captains are current or whether the couple have moved away or just otherwise need to turn over the reins to other people in order to organize. But when we throw our quarterly Map Your Neighborhood captains meetings, we usually get probably 50 to 60 neighborhood captains attending, which we think is a really good response.
And I'll just
So
throw out there that if you're trying to do a neighborhood meeting and you don't know of a space in your neighborhood that you feel comfortable holding it, reach out to me at the Senior Community Center and we'll try to help you have a space for this as part of our participation in Bainbridge Prepares. Okay, onward to Nixle.
okay, on to Nixle. So about 11,000, maybe 12,000 Bainbridge Island residents have already signed up for Nixle. But if you have not, what Nixle is our emergency alert system. Um, it will historically it will tell you whether or not there's a road closure or a down power line or just some other incident that would affect your your safety, your sanity, or something else in your lives. There's going to be it's there's a few individuals that have the keys to send out the alerts. Ann Lesage, who I mentioned, is our city emergency manager. She is the primary user of the Nixle system, but the police department and the fire department also have means to push out alerts through that system. There's going to be a little bit of a change is going to be rolled out. Nixle is not going away. It's just going to be separated between text alerts and email alerts. So if there's a road closure or road work being done, it's a less of an urgent issue necessarily than a text alert. So the text alerts are going to be reserved for truly kind of emergent situations that you really need to know about soon. And email is going to be the preferred method for getting those not as urgent communication messages out. So more to come from Anne and the city on that.
And if you
Yep.
don't use text, and
Hmm.
you want and you want to get called, there
Yep.
is a robocall option. You can contact Island Volunteer Caregivers or the Senior Community Center to get on a list to be called. But text is probably the most efficient way for most of us.
Great. Yes. Great mention there. I believe the robocall option, last I checked, probably had about 200 individuals on that. We don't use it very often, but again, in those really urgent situations, we will send a robocall out. So, um, my last two bullets, kind of think about yourself. So, you've got the communication alerts down. Now let's make sure that your home is safe and that you can take care of yourself and your family and your pets and your loved ones. Ensure you have enough water, food, and a hygiene/sanitation plan for at least for roughly 2 weeks. Given the severity of a major incident, it may be 2 weeks before outside help will get to the island. And so we want everybody to kind of take care of themselves, maybe help take care of again your neighbors for a 2 week period. And you can learn about all of this and more uh, through our website, bainbridgeprepares.org. So, what is Bainbridge Prepares for those that may not know very much about it? So Bainbridge Prepares is 501(c)(3), in other words, a nonprofit like the Senior Center, that has a core partnership with the City of Bainbridge Island and the Bainbridge Island Fire Department. So we basically are one leg of a three-legged stool in emergency preparedness and response. As of last Wednesday, we have 733 credentialed volunteers, which means that they've been background checked and in certain skill sets have had their license checked. So, for example, if we have a nurse or a doctor that says, I want to act at a level of what a nurse or a doctor can do, we can't just take them at their word. We have to check to see that they are licensed to perform the necessary medical care that they claim they can perform. So it goes beyond just kind of a criminal background check in many cases and to kind of more in-depth vetting. But 733 individuals have gone through that. A few, that number used to be a little bit higher, but we kind of did did a cleanup. A couple of our volunteers have moved away or had various other things happen to them. And so we were pretty happy with that 733 active credential volunteer count. You can look to see how active we have been in the last couple of years. So in 2021 and 2022, those were the active and kind of the third year of COVID. And so we were extremely active in COVID testing, COVID vaccinations, and just a whole bunch of other things pandemic related. But that's not all we do. And so we've been very active in 2023 and 2024, and we will easily exceed 7,000, maybe 8,000 hours in 2024 in terms of total volunteer hours in activities such as education or response. And lower in the slides, you can see how kind of unique we are as an emergency preparedness partnership. We've won a few awards over the years, and those are just a handful of them. So I talked about the total number of volunteers and the hours, but what do we actually do? What are those volunteers doing? So we do emergency education. So yeah, I mentioned the Map Your Neighborhood program, but we have a couple of other trainings that we offer. Anybody can take one of our monthly Stop the Bleed classes. We usually have them at the Bainbridge Island Fire Station 21, which is the main fire station, next to 305. But we have various other classes that you can sign up for via Eventbrite or via our website to just kind of brush up on your skills or meet similar-minded individuals. Of course, we also do emergency response. So, what are we training for? Well, we're training to actually respond to things. So, we staff severe weather shelters. We respond to public health emergencies, and basically are just sort of on call as surge capacity for the fire department, for public health, or for the city of Bainbridge. And of course, when we're also not doing that, we actually have to make sure that our supplies and various other structures are in shape and set up for responding to emergencies. So we have emergency hubs, which you can learn about on our website. We have water depots. We also do tech and other consulting services, and we do quite a bit of supplementation of the City of Bainbridge Island staff. And last but not least, because this is probably what takes up the majority of our time these days, is community event support. So I'll speak more about I'll show a couple pictures of our support in the next slide. But last night, just in terms of most recent, we had a few of our volunteers helping with the haunted hayride in terms of traffic control and radio support. But essentially, between April and September, we are probably busy every weekend supporting some public good community event that's going on the island. And those
And of
are
course,
just
that gives you a little muscle memory for when it's not about a fun event, but something not so fun.
Yes, exactly. So we call this blue sky event support. So basically, when usually in the summer it's a blue sky, we still kind of put those skills to use, so that when we have gray skies, meaning not so nice days, where actual emergency happens, we are not dusting off some skills that haven't been used in years. They were used, 2 weeks ago. So yeah, so these events keep us active, keep our traffic people, our technology people, our medical people kind of up and trained and at the ready. So just an example, and these are all pictures taken, I believe, in the last 9 to 10 months. So these aren't like 2-year-old, 3-year-old pictures. So on the left, you can see our founder, Scott James, with our city emergency manager, Ann Lesage, at the Rotary auction and rummage sale. For the Rotary auction alone, we provided over 120 volunteers for the entire setup week and auction day and auction cleanup, working a variety of roles, whether that be medical, whether it be radio support, technology support, traffic control. drone support, and you name it. Next picture, kind of upper middle left. So this is our Stop the Bleed team teaching the staff of the Tacoma, the ferry Tacoma, on how to use their newly installed Stop the Bleed kits. So Washington State Department of Transportation, Tacoma captain contacted us. They said, we have a bunch of new equipment that we're not quite trained to use. Our Department of Transportation training team may take a few months to be able to train us. Can you do it sooner than that? So I believe this was, probably last February or so, when we went on the Tacoma before they started operations and trained their A shift on Stop the Bleed. And so there was about a 45-minute training, and then they kicked us off and started loading cars. About 20 minutes later. Down below is our first aid team, providing support for the Chili Hilly. Chili Hilly, we also provide radio support, tracking all those bike riders and various people that need assistance through the Around the Island bike relay. And there's a lot of bumps and bruises and individuals that maybe didn't quite dress properly for the weather, or maybe were in less physical fitness than they had anticipated. And so our first aid team is there to assist them. And so we stay busy that day. Uh, Upper right is one of our first pictures from staffing the emergency weather shelter. Last, again, January, February, where we had, I believe, over a 7-night period, 27 individual 5-hour shifts to get us through the cold stretch. Um, and that beautiful building that those volunteers and analyst stage are standing in is the senior center. So we thank them for being kind of our severe weather shelter of choice, to take care of all the the guests that really needed a warm place to stay during the day and overnight, on days where it was 18 degrees or 20 degrees. These include some unhoused individuals, as well as some liveaboards, and just various other people from within Winslow that where their accommodations would not keep them comfortable or safe through a very, very cold stretch of time.
Great.
And then last, oh, go ahead, Reed.
No, I was just saying, great. Glad you were
Yeah.
able to use it and glad that the center is helpful in that.
Yeah. And then last picture on the slide is our boat support for the Arms Around Bainbridge around the island swim relay. So a few years ago, we started working with the Arms Around Bainbridge, and nowadays they are like, you guys know what your flotilla knows what it's doing. Can you just take over boat support for the swim, and we're just going to worry about the swimmers and their associated kayakers. So we help coordinate all the boat support that involves, kind of being there for, again, those medical emergencies, or kind of, discouraging kind of rogue, other boaters from kind of invading swim lanes and stuff like that. So that's a picture taken by our drone team of two of our flotilla boats activated for Arms Around Bainbridge. All right, almost done. So not only do we stuff on Bainbridge Island, but we are involved in regional, state, and national things as well. So this picture on the left is taken a week ago. Actually, a week ago on Thursday, we had the Washington State Emergency Management Team, specifically the tsunami hazards team. One thing that a lot of state agencies like to do with us is because of our unique partnership. They're like, let's try these emergency management techniques on Bainbridge first, because if we can't get this program that we're trying to roll out to work on Bainbridge, it's probably not going to be able to roll out anywhere, because again, of that kind of that cohesion we have in the partnership to really get our community on board with emergency management and emergency programs. Middle picture is our Medical Reserve Corps co-lead, Dr. David Cowan. He's the primary care physician at Virginia Mason. He and I presenting at the Association for Strategic Preparedness and Response, which is a federal agency under Homeland Security. That was a conference in Chicago, and we were presenting about the partnership and specifically our Medical Reserve Corps, which is the largest team in our partnership. And then just a random quick photo I took of tour we got from the State Department of Health of their logistics warehouse in Lacey, Washington. And those are various pallets and that sort of thing that can be distributed in the case of an emergency. And we just try to coordinate with them on various activities so that we know about them and they know about us. And it's less of a hurdle to get help from them when we need it. Um, because we are in Q4 and because there's Giving Tuesday and various other things coming up, I figured I would address a couple of frequently asked questions. And one of them is given everything that we do, there's an assumption that we get FEMA or various other federal funding. Um, I would love to say that we get quite a bit of funding from FEMA, but that is simply not the case. To date, FEMA has provided no money to us in our 13 years of existence. FEMA is generally known to uh, provide actual disaster funding. So, essentially, think of the Maui wildfires, think of the North Carolina Helene impact. FEMA really kind of comes in after a disaster takes place. I would say more often in terms of just monetary spending. And a lot of just general preparedness activities and funding are really come from the more state and local government agencies. We do receive some funding from other federal agencies, but in 2024, with the dry up of the COVID funding, we actually received no money last year or this year from federal entities. What about Washington State or other local governmental agencies? So we received uh, $12,500 in 2023 and 2024 independently from the city of Bainbridge Island. And while we receive quite a bit of in-kind support from other governmental agencies, to date, no direct dollar funding from those agencies. So something we're always working on, but in case there are any sort of myths about where our funding comes from, I just want to dispel them on this slide. And with that, I'm
Oh,
open to any questions.
so of course that means that where the funding is coming from is mostly from direct donations and local foundations.
Yes, that is correct. So we get funding, primarily programmatic funding from places like Rotary, which is, generous and about 10 to $15,000 per year for various community programs that we do. Puget Sound Energy is a sponsor of us. They provide, around $3,000 for our day of
Oh, Loren.
preparedness. Yes.
Sorry, you broke up there when I stopped you sharing. So you get money from the Rotary. You apply yearly for the community grants program there.
Yep. From Bainbridge Community Foundation, again, for more programmatic, meaning individual program things, and from corporate sponsors such as Puget Sound Energy. But typically, those dollar amounts are in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, and not larger windfalls that are necessary to keep us operating.
So what is
Um,
your annual budget roughly in
yeah, so
round
it's around.
numbers?
Yes, it's around $200,000, which we stretch that significantly. Given our scale, we are attempting to increase both the funding coming in and the the salaries of permanent staff, and that does include me. And so that's something that we're working up over the years. And so, but we're working both to improve our individual donor dollar amounts as well as agency support. But any little bit helps to increase our budgets beyond kind of that that bare minimum that we're at right now.
Well, and as we know, although I mean every year stuff just costs a little more,
It does.
and we want to make sure that the people who are organizing it, people like you, when at some point you aren't doing that job, we have an organization that can afford to hire somebody in the future. So, and nonprofits are not paying top dollar, but but I do know that from my personal experience that it's rewarding work, and I'm sure that's
It
true for you
is.
too.
Yes, it is.
So
And with
that's
yeah,
with that, I'd just like to thank you and point people to bainbridgeprepares.org and also to the Shakeout website. And we do have some of these prepare in a year forms here if you want to come down to the senior center and ask for that. We have them at the front desk. And if you do it right away, you can even get instructions on drop, cover, and hold.
beautiful, wonderful. Well, Reed, thank you very much for the invite to speak.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I enjoyed it.